Right folks, Rick Wall came back again, doing something a little bit different this time. See, this week marks the launch of Maleficent in cinemas, and being a big Disney fan, I want to do something to celebrate that. Now, I thought of doing all kinds of different things. Thought about digging out my Disney Star Wars, you know, where all the Disney characters are dressed up as Star Wars characters. But this isn't like me, but I want to keep them mint in box, so I'm not getting them out. I thought about taking a couple of figure box sets that we've got upstairs, doing a review of them. But they don't really link to Maleficent. So I decided to do instead was take a look at my top 10 Disney villains. Now, Disney have created some of the best villains of all time. I love the characters. And it was so hard narrowing it down to just 10. And this is my list. You don't have to agree with it. You might change a few around, you might drop a few, bring a few in. But I'm telling you, this is how I see it. Personal opinion. So don't get mad. And the question becomes, what makes a good villain? Is it about their evil countenance? Their vicious plots? Their cutting wit? Their British accent? It's that last one, Disney, I am available. Whatever it is, these are some of the most iconic characters in all of filmdom. So, without further ado, let's get straight into the top 10. Number 10 on the list, and only just scraping in, is Queen Grimhilde. Not a name I know, only came across it doing research for this. To me, she's just the Wicked Queen. Seems like that's the official Disney view too. In many ways, this is the archetype of all Disney villains. One exception, everyone on this list only exists because of her. Forget it all started with a mouse. It all started with a question. Who is the fairest of them all? The Grimms created the perfect villain archetype here, and Disney stuck close to the story on this one, so they kept the magic. What she wanted was clear and simple. Her motive was obvious. She was cold and distant. Okay, so we didn't get a great deal of depth to her, but what she was struck a chord. It just worked. She had the typical Disney villain motive of power and jealousy, but there weren't cliches in this, they were brand new. She is remembered as a much better villain than she was because of her iconic status, her fantastic look and her voice. Those three things mean she deserves to be in this list. But compare her to others on the list and she is a little two-dimensional. Then there's the issue of her second plan, the poison apple. Nothing wrong with the apple itself. It's an iconic plot that deserves its place as a classic bit of shtick. It's how she makes herself into an ugly old hag. Seriously, she uses a potion to transform herself into a twisted and ugly old hag so she can become the fairest in the land. Seems an odd move, especially when the film gives us no evidence of her being able to turn back, with her dying in this form. Presumably there's an antidote, but even so, it's a very strange plan. Guess it made sense in her head. The most recent name on this list, the main villain from the excellent Wreck-It Ralph, King Candy. He is one of the most well-developed villains on this list, with clear motivation, a strong scheme that is working well until the protagonist, we can't really call Ralph the hero, accidentally starts messing things up for him. He has a clear reason to hate Vanellope, even if we're not told it until the end, and everything he does follows a sense of logic, more or less. He never does evil for evil's sake. He might be spiteful and vindictive, but mostly he's acting simply out of selfishness and a need to survive. Okay, when he takes his one-winged angel form, he goes a little into the over-the-top villain mode. But he's just become an insectoid monster virus, and become what he considers a god. That's the sort of thing that'll spin the head of any power-hungry megalomaniac, especially when you've got a cybug eating your brain. The twist we get when his origin is revealed is pulled off perfectly. It makes perfect sense looking back at the clues, but is never directly hinted at until the big reveal. This twist is one of the main reasons he's on this list. It sets him out from the pack, if you'll forgive the racing analogy. What also sets him apart is his character. He's eccentric and flamboyant and always the centre of attention. And he's clearly based on the Mad Hatter, but that's not a bad thing. You like him, making the reveal of him being Turbo that much more effective. Saying that, he's not always as threatening as a good villain needs to be, and the last minute upgrade into the bug form feels like he wasn't strong enough as a villain before that. Time will be the judge on this villain. For now, he deserves his place here. It's the cruel devil herself, and by far the most memorable thing in 101 Dalmatians for me, Cruella De Vil. I've actually known people not get the joke of her name. Cruella De Vil, cruel devil, get it? Okay, it's not the best joke, but it was 1961. In fact, the character comes from the novel, which was 5 years before that. Puns were in then. She was a wonderfully manic character, and not every villain gets the affectionate parody from The Simpsons. She's memorable, got motivation that almost makes sense. She's the classic selfish and self-centered villain that Disney do so well. Both the animated version and live action ones were awesome. Glenn Close is perfectly cast. I can't believe they'll find anyone better for the film named after her. The big problem she has, of course, is that she's well dispatched in each version that when she comes back in the sequel, it seems like a cheap rerun rather than a vital rematch. The two main reasons she makes this list, though, aren't her two memorable portrayals, her iconic image, or even because I'm British and therefore an animal lover, making her an even worse villain. No, the two main reasons she makes this list are firstly, the fact she has an awesome song. A good villain song sums up the character, tells us the story, fills in the details we'd miss otherwise, moves the story on, and lots of other things. This one's unique, though, because the villain doesn't sing it. She's not even there. Someone else giving us his view of the character, the point of view we're meant to share. Doesn't hurt that it's an awesome song. The other reason she makes this list is nothing to do with the films, not even the animated series. It's because of Disneyland, Florida. Back when my niece wasn't the typical teenager she is now, she loved getting photos and autographs at the park. One of them was Cruella. She was just really awesome, even making a fun comment about her spotty skirt. It helped make a great day in the park. I mean, it's moments like this the parks are there for. Simply awesome job. What better villain could there be than a pirate? And what pirate better than Captain James Bartholomew Hook? Captain Jack who? No, never heard of him. No, here we're talking about Peter Pan's nemesis. Now, Hook is probably the most notorious villain, appearing in a lot of different contexts. But I've only really seen him in Peter Pan. This probably helps him on this list, as I haven't seen the constant upstaging he probably gets in Jake and the Neverland Pirates. So I don't know about his villain decay. Saying that, I think I would like to see how the young version of him is played in the Tinkerbell film, The Pirate Fairy. As a prequel, it won't really damage him in Peter Pan. What separates Hook from the other villains on this list is his humour. Okay, so most of them have funny moments, but Hook manages to be funny, whether on purpose or accident, most of the time, and he never loses his threat level. I mean, for me, the greatest interchange in pretty much any Disney film is when Hook warns Peter, "If I were you, I'd give up." And Peter simply quips back, "If you were me, I'd be ugly." Now, this seems like your typical action hero banter. Spider-Man does it all the time. But this was 1953. This is why these type of exchanges caught on. And it's still the classic zing. And he looks amazing. Always reminds me of John Cleese. I still think he would be amazing playing him in the film, though Dustin Hoffman was good too. Though that's not Disney. Let's not talk about that. You can see how Hook inspired so many other villains, from Dick Dastardly to the Shadow Man from Princess and the Frog. He's still the best pirate Disney has created. Back in 1989, Disney were in trouble, at least as far as animated films were concerned. They hadn't had a hit in some time, and the money was running out. Well, that's Cliff Notes anyway. Then, in 1989, everything changed. It was a second golden age being ushered in, and along with a new generation of heroes and princesses, we also had a new generation of villains. The first of these was Sheila the Sea Witch. Now, Disney has been accused of reinforcing negative stereotypes, having its main heroines be defined by their man. But if you look at the female villains, what you tend to see are strong, independent women. None more so than Ursula. Now, if you forget about her being power-hungry and manipulative, she actually makes a strong role model. She's confident, powerful, assertive, comfortable in her own skin. She's actually a positive figure, if you ignore the evil. Yes, she's at least as power-hungry as everyone else on this list. Maybe even more so. Yes, she doesn't care who she hurts to get what she wants. In fact, she revels in the carnage she leaves in her wake. For me, her and Sebastian made The Little Mermaid into a good movie. Her motives are clear. She wants power. Her methods are straightforward. She gives people what they think they want, but twists it and takes their soul as payment. Her powers are many and varied, making her seem even more threatening, as do her creepy hench eels. She also comes damn close to winning. If not for the plucky stupidity of a certain redhead and her would-be boyfriend, she'd be ruling the waves as we speak, and probably the surface world by now too. Ursula was in fact the perfect foil for Ariel. It was the manipulative wisdom against the naive passion, with passion coming out on top because it doesn't know it's beaten. I don't think any Disney villain has come this close to winning, nor do I think any other will. The fact she's not in the sequel helps too. She gets to stay the strong, independent woman without any villain decay. Okay, quick question before we head into the top 5. Who's the oldest active Disney character? Too easy, right? We all know the phrase, it started with a mouse. Has to be Mickey, right? Right? Wrong. My number 5, it's Pete. It may seem like a strange choice, but since his debut in 1925, 3 years before a certain chirpy mouse, he's had a CV most actors would die for. He's used the name Pegleg Pete, Big Bad Pete, and even Black Pete, but generally Pete has done him. It takes a special kind of character to be the nemesis of the original American icon, but he's had major rivalries with Donald Duck, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and Goofy as well. In fact, to a whole generation, he'll always be Goofy's long-suffering neighbour and the antagonist of Goof Troop. He was less a villain in that, as he was a victim of living next door to Goofy. Not something I'd want to do. Saying that, he was still a used car salesman, so... Pete suffered badly from villain decay, and is now seen more as a baddie rather than a villain, especially in his Clubhouse guise. But it's not a shock, that, really. Between 1925 and 1954, he appeared in more than 40 shorts. He was the antagonist for House and Mouse, and even turned up in 5 episodes of DuckTales. Unlike other villains who have clear motives, Pete would adapt to the role he was thrown into, be that an authority figure or a hardened criminal. He can be menacing, or even at times sympathetic, though he's still almost always exclusively the bad guy even then. His key characteristic is his deep, booming voice. It's a cool signature that suits this versatile villain that is far too often overlooked. He is Mickey's nemesis though, so wherever you see the mouse, you can bet Pete's not far behind. You ask me? That's still a very good thing. Getting the most respect of any villain this side of Maleficent, number 4 is Jafar. Now Jafar is a very rare figure in all of cinema, in that he never suffered from villain decay. In his original film, he was beaten in the typical way, hoisted by his own power-hungry petard. He'd been dealt with, and we were satisfied with that. No rematch needed. Or so we thought. Step forward Aladdin 2, The Return of Jafar. I'd enjoyed the first film, thought it might be worth watching, so I gave it a go. I was very impressed. Yes, okay, the story itself was flawed. It could have been tighter in terms of writing, but it had some impressive moments. Most importantly, Jafar lost none of his charm, his humour, or his menace. In fact, he may have been that little bit more frightening. Certainly his powers had been cranked up, and his desire for revenge makes sense. Plus, only second rate, it's one of the greatest villain songs ever. That counts a lot for me. It's not just about his appearance in the sequel though. In the first one, he is the perfect British villain, even if he was voiced by an American. Elegant, charming and sinister. I know a lot of people who say they still get shivers when they think of him, which is, of course, a sign of a great villain. The only thing that let him down was his motivation. We know he wants power, he wants to rule, but we never find out why. Hints are dropped that something happened where he came from, but nothing becomes clear. This doesn't stop him being an amazing villain. He has an amazing look that is instantly recognisable, an incredible voice performance that oozes charisma and power, and a well-defined motive in terms of the film being constantly well written. Certainly, he's not second rate. Beware the mystic powers of the Shadow Man at number 3. It's Dr Facilier. This character takes some of the best bits from Captain Hook, Jafar and Ursula, mixes them up with the spirit of jazz. He moves, acts and talks like a showman. He's charismatic, energetic, funny, and his mood will turn on a dime, making him sinister, angry and scary. Unlike many Disney villains, he's not the supreme power of evil in the film. Instead, he's got friends on the other side that give him powers. Imagine him a bit like Mumra calling the ancient spirits of evil. This doesn't stop him from acting like the powers are his own, which ends up being his undoing when his friends come calling for their debts. Speaking of his friends, he has such an awesome villain song called Friends on the Other Side. It's still one of the most played songs on my phone. He is another of Disney's classic manipulative and power-hungry types. He wants to be the most powerful man in New Orleans. An achievable goal too, which puts him ahead of other villains. It's even hinted he has a poor background, like the main hero of the piece, but it's never openly stated. He has a very cool look too, designed after the lower of Death, Baron Samedi, and he's in the classic villain colours of black, purple and red. I think any other villain in a film like this would have just felt wrong, and that's without mentioning the silky voice provided by Keith David, which not only fits the character and the setting perfectly, it brings him to life. I have no doubt he will be seen as the ultimate villain of this era of Disney classics, and be conning people out of their heart's desires for a long time to come. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. Maleficent, only number 2? That's just not right. Sorry, she just misses the top spot for me. And there is no denying she is by far and away the best villain name in all of Disney. Maybe all of cinema history. And that alone put her in the top 10. But that alone is not enough. So she can transform into a dragon. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay, very cool. In fact, as far as evil fairy superpowers go, it is in fact awesome. She also looks the ultimate villain. She has the long flowing robes, high cheekboned green skin, mystic golden staff, weird headdress giving her a unique profile. She's even evolved into the mastermind villain among villains. A Lex Luthor style villain that manipulates from the background but will step up to face the heroes, whether that's Philip, Mickey or Sora, if she needs to. I haven't seen her new film yet, and let's not forget she's the first villain to have her own movie, but I'm sure it'll add to her iconic status. And have you seen Angelina Jolie in that costume? She is perfect for the role. But essentially for me, she has 2 big weaknesses. The first, I believe, will be addressed in the new film, and it's her motivation. In Sleeping Beauty, she's been snubbed for the baby shower, so she curses the child. Seems a bit of an overreaction. Maybe there's more that we don't see. After all, she is a sucker for swearing revenge. In her other key role, Kingdom Hearts, it's all about power. Now this makes much more sense. Her other major weakness is the fact she goes in for long convoluted schemes. Why curse a baby about something set to happen 16 years later, especially if you're going to fret about it, when you have the power to do so much worse then and there? Then there's a plan for Philip. Keep him prisoner for 100 years and let him go to see if his princess still wants him. Okay, 10 points for cruelty, but minus about 1,000 for not finishing it there and then and becoming a tool of your own destruction. Also, she's a fairy, hardly the most intimidating subspecies on this list. So, if she's number 2, who can number 1 be? So, here it is, my number 1 Disney villain, and for me, there was no one else I could pick to top this list. His villain song puts it best when it says, "No one plots like Gaston, takes cheap shots like Gaston, plans to persecute harmless crackpots like Gaston." That's right, my number 1 comes from Beauty and the Beast, and his name is Gaston. Now, not the biggest shock in the world when you consider Beauty and the Beast is probably my favourite Disney film. So, just what puts him on top here? Well, there's plenty to look at. Shakespeare said that the best villain is a good man with a fatal flaw. Now Gaston is a respected hunter, he's the strongest, the fastest, a slice of physical perfection. In another story, he could be your textbook hero. Trouble is, he's conceited and arrogant and very selfish. Now that's something we've come across a lot in this list. Also, being the Adonis type, he contrasts with the two heroes of the story so well. Belle, despite being the most beautiful girl in the town, is an outcast because of her kooky ways and intellect, while Gaston is popularity itself. On the other hand, the Beast is a monster on the outside, but inside he's a prince, while Gaston is exactly the opposite. Unlike many other Disney stories, the stakes aren't all that high. It's not about saving a kingdom or stopping all powerful magic creatures. Essentially, it's about saving a single person. This makes the tale feel all the more personal and actually pushes the emotion up. Gaston is important to make that work. And the last key point that defines him as an ultimate villain is the fact he's offered redemption and refuses it. The Beast spares him, tempting him to bring him back from the edge, leading to Gaston sacrificing himself to kill the Beast. The fact that death didn't take for the Beast doesn't make what Gaston did any better. In Gaston's mind, he still won. He killed his foe. I can't think of another villain that actually felt he'd won. In his own mind, his pride was satisfied. Plus, he is such a fun character. Amusing when he needs to be, sinister when he needs to be, dangerous, cunning, and always done with a glint in his eye that made it look like he was having a great time the whole way through. He doesn't have any strong stories outside of his role in Beauty and the Beast, unless you count the Broadway musical. His appearance in that, making his #1 ranking here almost certain. He's been played perfectly in that for me. So he only has the rivalry he's perfect for. Truly, no one is a villain like Gaston.